Don wanted heads. Prosecutors release details of confessions in Grisly killings as 3 plead guilty to non-capital murder. A Don gave the orders for a St. Catherine woman and her teenage daughter to be decapitated because they were viewed as informers, according to the video-recorded confessions of 3 of the men convicted for the Grisly crime. Transcripts of the confessions were released by prosecutors yesterday after Fabian Smith, Adrian Campbell, and Rushane Goldson pleaded guilty to non-capital murder just before they were set to go on trial in the home circuit court for the 2011 double killing that triggered national outrage. Smith, who is also known as Gubba, recounted, in his caution statement to detectives, a telephone conversation he had with the Don moments before he and 8 of his cronies barged into the 2-bedroom board house in which Charmaine Cover-Rattray, 40, and her 18-year-old daughter, Joeith Lynch, were asleep on the night of July 20, 2011. Kill Crystal and her modda, shoot up such man house, and make dem run away and kill all the others. Him said 4 people should dead, 4 a dem head must cut off, and him say, make sure you deal with the thing, Smith disclosed, using Lynch's pet name. The convicted killer revealed that Cover-Rattray twice shouted, "The blood of Jesus is against you," before she was chopped repeatedly with a machete and shot 4 times. He said Lynch, a past student of the Queen's School, pleaded for her life, saying, "I do not know nothing," before she, too, was chopped repeatedly and shot. Me hear the lass, cutlass, dem start swing and har modda a plea the blood of Jesus and Crystal a scream out. Den me hear about 6 shots, Smith recounted for detectives, using Lynch's pet name. The convicted killer admitted that he saw his cronies exit the house and immediately questioned, "Where are the heads?" He said that one of his accomplices went back inside the house and me hear the lass start swing again. Me see such man come out wid one a de head and such man come out with the next one, he recounted. Campbell admitted, in his videotaped statement, that he took up one of the heads, believed to be Lynch's, and held it by the hair as they fled the house. Such man said to me that the head is bleeding too much, I must throw it away. I throw the head in a gully, he told detectives. Either I was involved or I would be killed. Is not something that I wishfully wanted to take part of. I know I was dealing with some serious people. It was either I go or I die, he said. According to prosecutors Paula Llewellyn and Hodine Williams, a post-mortem revealed that Cover-Rattray was shot 6 times all over her body and chopped 8 times. The bones in the neck were severed and the margins of the wounds were smooth and uniform. The cause of death was due to traumatic shock and multiple gunshot wounds to the abdomen and the neck, with multiple chop wounds, Llewellyn disclosed. For Lynch, the post-mortem revealed that she died from traumatic shock and multiple chop wounds. Prosecutors say it appeared that both women had died before they were decapitated. Cover-Rattray and Lynch were killed a day after Scott Thomas, a reputed gangster, was also beheaded in their community of Lauriston. Campbell said he was told that the women were targeted because dem talk too much. Justice has been served. Adrian Campbell, 37, and Fabian Smith, 33, were ordered to serve 44 years for each count of murder before being eligible for parole, while Rushane Goldson, 28, must serve a minimum of 46 years. The 4th man, Kemar Riley, 29, who was convicted after a 3-week trial, will become eligible for parole after 52 years. The men will serve their respective sentences for each count concurrently. A 5th accused, Sanya Dukali, a former assistant teacher at the St. Catherine Primary School, was freed on November 20 after the court upheld a no-case submission. Despite the passage of time since July 20, 2011, when the men invaded the Lauriston, St. Catherine, home of 40-year-old Charmaine, Gloria Cover-Rattray and her 18-year-old daughter, Joeith Crystal Lynch, chopping, shooting, and subsequently beheading them, the relative explained that the family still mourns. "We'll always be grieving because Crystal was loved, people loved Gloria, so we'll always be grieving when birthdays, when Christmas, when whatever. We'll always remember her," said the relative, who also delivered a victim impact statement before the sentence was handed down. Aggravating factor. In the victim statement, the relative, who cannot be named or the sex identified because of a court order, described how the killing of Cover-Rattray and her daughter continued to affect the family. During the sentencing proceedings, Director of Public Prosecutions Paula Llewellyn, who was the lead prosecutor during the trial, said the aggravating factor outweighed the mitigating ones. They totally overwhelm and neutralize anything that could mitigate the sentence, the DPP said. It took them 7 years until they were minded to show that aspect of remorse that a guilty plea would herald. She described the murder as a sinister execution, total and horrific breach of the human rights of Joeith and her mother. Defense attorneys for Campbell, Smith, and Goldson cited their respective clients' lack of a criminal record and guilty pleas as mitigating factors, while the attorney for Riley said that his client, though not accepting responsibility for the crime, seemingly expressed remorse for the murder's impact on the community. Trial Judge Justice Vivian Harris, in handing down the sentences, considered aggravating factors such as the carriage of weapons and the horrific way in which the women were killed, citing that there was no case in the local court of appeal that spoke to beheading that she could use to guide her decision. Justice Harris also indicated that she abandoned the sentencing guidelines as it would outrage and shock the public conscience. She also considered mitigating factors such as the men's lack of prior convictions as well as the time already spent behind bars since their 2011 arrests. Weird twist. In the hours when the Queen's School student Joeith Lynch and her mother Charmaine Cover-Rattray were screaming and fighting for their lives at their house in Lauriston, St. Catherine, Sanjay Tukali, who now stands accused of murder in the gruesome death of both women, says he was on his way from a function in the dead of night and, on hearing the shrieks, went to investigate only to get caught up in the incident which has landed him behind bars for 9 years. The caution statement of Tukali, who on Wednesday pleaded not guilty to 2 counts of murder, along with co-accused Kemar Riley, was played into the records of the Supreme Court in downtown Kingston during the second day of the trial. On the day of the incident I was coming from a function that was supposed to be held in Lauriston. Upon reaching at the Brookway right next to where Crystal and her mother Joy live, I heard some noise like someone was screaming. Upon hearing this I went to look what was going on, Tukali said in his videotaped statement which was shown to the court. He said when he went into the house and entered Lynch's room he saw 2 men, one of whom, Roshane Goldson, who on Tuesday pleaded guilty and was charged with non-capital murder, was busy chopping Crystal. I said, "What going on?" He couldn't answer because he was busy chopping Crystal, so I was standing next to him, and while he was chopping he swung the cutlass and it chopped me on my hand. Same time I ran outside, and I jump over the back fence and run around the lane and up on Rio Cabra Drive, stated Tukali, who is being represented by defense attorneys Anthony Williams and Julianne Bailey. According to him, it was while running away from the scene that he heard 5 to 6 gunshots fired. He was, however, more concerned about his injured hand, which he wrapped with his shirt. Moments later, he said, the 2 men he had seen in the room approached him. Roshane said, "Why you come inside the room and got chopped?" and I didn't answer him because I was in pain and wanted to see the doctor, Tukali said, adding that he insisted on seeing a doctor and was told he could not go to the hospital but would be taken to a private doctor the next day. According to Tukali, when he insisted that he wanted to see a doctor that night out of fear that he might lose his hand because his finger was getting stiff, he was taken to Kingston Public Hospital and was told to return the next day to get his hand stitched. He, however, claimed he went to a rural area next day, because a relative of his was going to visit from overseas, and ended up getting his hand stitched at Port Maria Hospital instead. According to Tukali, a former assistant teacher, he didn't know who else was there because he didn't see them. During the videotaped account, Tukali wrote fluidly under the watchful eyes of a lawyer and police investigators, yawning once and only stopping to scratch his head or rub his forehead or to find out from the officers whether he should write everything that took place that night or whether it was after the incident. Me must write, the bespectacled Tukali, who was observed reading a Bible prior to the start of the trial, sat quietly in the dock beside the other co-accused, Riley, observing the proceedings. A relative of the deceased, in a written statement read into the court's records, indicated that she had warned Crystal in a phone call that the word was on the street that her death, along with her mother's, had been ordered. However, Rattray, who had been unemployed for 2 months at the time, was overheard saying she would not be leaving because she had nowhere to go. "I don't know why they were killed. I know a man who lived next door named Scotty was killed," the relative said, noting that Scotty's girlfriend, who was present at the home when he was killed, was not harmed. Another relative, in another statement, noted that while members of the family who also lived in the area were feuding, Rattray was not involved. She was a peacemaker. "I don't know the reason they met such a horrible death. I don't know of them having any conflict with anyone," the individual indicated. According to the statement of another witness, the mother had been unable to even pay for her daughter's graduation as she had no money. The day before her death, a relative, in answer to Rattray's complaint that she had no food to eat, had taken supplies to her, only to hear later that they had met a brutal end mere hours after. 10 statements, including 7 from witnesses who will not be taking the stand, were read into the court's records, a move which Director of Public Prosecutions Paula Llewellyn said saved the court considerable time in the trial, which is expected to last some 2 weeks, and showed the importance of cooperation between the prosecution and the defense. Also admitted into evidence among the 10 statements were the post-mortem report of the forensic pathologist, the ballistics expert's report, and the DNA report. The 29-year-old Duckley was part of a group of 5 allegedly involved in the brutal massacre of Lynch and her mother during an invasion of the women's house, supposedly on the instructions of an individual referred to as the General in what Llewellyn described as murder most foul. They were not merely there, they were there for a purpose: to aid and abet in the killing of the women, the DPP said in leading the evidence for the prosecution. In the trial, which lasted some 15 working days, it emerged that a group of about 8 or 9 males invaded the women's home at 46 Berry Drive in the dead of night on July 19, 2011 and chopped them to near death before shooting and beheading them, leaving the house blood-drenched and discarding the heads in separate places. Justice Harris, who said she was going beyond the prescribed limits of the sentencing guidelines because of the aggravating circumstances of the case, sentenced Campbell to life imprisonment at hard labor. He will serve a minimum 44 years before being eligible for parole on both counts of the indictment. Goldson, who is Lynch's cousin, was also slapped with a life sentence at hard labor for his role in her murder and will be eligible for parole after a minimum of 46 years. Smith also faces life at hard labor and will serve a minimum 44 years before being eligible for parole. Riley, the only one of the group who refused to cooperate with the police, and who consistently denied the testimony of a star prosecution witness who said Riley had confessed to being the one to shoot Lynch in the head that fateful night, was slapped with life imprisonment at hard labor, and will serve a minimum 52 years before being eligible for parole. Subscribe, like, share, and drop a comment.